Here's one way to find out what will grow easily from seed in your area. This is my compost pile, and you can see it's next to the woods. Not the best place to have a garden, but here's the compost pile. And whenever I prepare food in the kitchen, the scraps along with the seeds gets dumped into my compost pile. Then all I have to do is wait and see what comes up in the spring. That's going to give me a good indication of what's going to grow easily from seed in my area. Here you can see I have potato plants that came up on their own. Here's tomato. Quite a few of them springing up. Little pepper. Over here we have squash. More potato. More squash. You can see here's a unused potato that's starting to sprout. And even creeping into the woods we have garlic. And here's more garlic. That's one of the indicators of what's going to grow easily and well in my area. Just throw it in the compost pile and see what comes up. A survival garden should contain something of substance like the three sisters, which is corn, bean, and squash, or, as I say, potatoes. They're things that are going to be around a while, they store well if you prepare them properly, and they have sustenance. The three sisters, very important, and potatoes for your survival garden. You want to grow potatoes? Don't get your sack at your local store that's treated with chemicals to prohibit growth of the eyes. Go to your organic store, buy your organic potatoes, use the potato but cut the eyes off, as I did. Roots and shoots. I'll get into that later. As to what plants should be started as seed directly into the garden, and those that are better off grown as young plants and then put into the garden, that's a personal choice, and you'll have to experiment with your area to find out what works best. Now for me personally, I know that there are many dark leafy greens that I could plant directly in the soil as soon as the frost is done and the soil is workable, and I'll get a good crop even before the insects start to hit, and then I can get another crop and even a fall crop. There are also hot weather vegetables like beans and squash that I could plant direct seeds into the soil and get a good crop. However, there are subtropic plants like tomato and pepper that are better off grown in a greenhouse, and then the young plants planted into the soil for best results to get mature plants before the cool weather sets in the fall. Now as a side note, here's a quick tip on choosing plants. When you look for plants at your garden center, look for well-greened, straight plants that have a thick stem. Nice well-green, no browning, no yellowing, nice thick stems, evenly growing plants. Now this has a little bit of yellow, but that's not a real concern. Those bottom leaves will actually be plucked off because I'm going to bury the plant up to the first branch when I plant it. So there's some considerations. Another consideration is find plants that are going to do well for your soil. Now I have a variety of plants when it comes to tomatoes that do well in my area. I can plant just about any kind of tomato, and I do try different varieties to see what works best. I get small tomatoes, I get medium tomatoes, early tomatoes, and I get the larger tomatoes. And that gives me a variety of tomatoes that are going to come into maturity at different times in the season, and they're also going to give me a variety of sizes. That's going to make my tomato season last longer and give me a variety of uses. Also, I choose herbs that I can plant and not worry about every year planting. Here I have oregano that comes up well every year, grows in a harsh environment. Horseradish, the same thing. Chives, sage, they all grow well in this dry, hot, sunny part of the garden, and it's stuff that I do use. Hardy perennials come up every year and require little maintenance, if any at all. Many of them are very good for food value, but also have medicinal properties that are very helpful. These are some of the dried herbs that I have left over from last year. This is basil. I used up several containers. Here's one almost gone. Here's one still full. You'd be amazed at how fresh this smells. Better than stuff you're going to buy in a store. Here's mint. Used several containers of that. and even chives. You know, soup, stews. Here's an example of a food that you might not think is long-term, but that can be made long-term. Habanero and jalapeno peppers, halved and dried in my dehydrator, stored in a jelly jar. The same thing turned into a powder for use, labeled so I know what it is, and put it in an old container. But you can also pickle, and you can also freeze the same type of thing. I'll show you a sauce that I made from these. Habanero salsa. I eat a lot of this stuff, and there's a lot of stuff in it. You can see my sauces are loaded with vegetables: zucchini, onions, garlic, tomato, pepper, and so on. What you eat should be an important deciding factor on what kind of plants and seeds you're going to grow in your garden. Some foods like peppers, vegetable broths, berries like blueberries, salsas and sauces, these things store very well in the freezer and may be a deciding factor on what you should grow in your survival garden. Starting plants from seeds is very cost effective. However, it might not be effective for your area for all the time and energy that it takes to grow certain plants from seed, like peppers and tomato. In fact, there are many areas where you can buy plants by the flat, very cheap. I picked up a flat full of plants for $14. Very cost effective and time effective for me. So it's more worth it for me to buy certain things as seeds and other things as plants. On another note, when I do have very successful plants, I tend to save a few fruit that I can collect the seeds from for the next year's planting. These are chive seeds from last year's growing. I have so many, I don't know what to do with them all. Doesn't matter summer or winter squash. One fruit from each will give you enough seeds for the next year's planting. Your home garden's probably not going to produce onions and potatoes like this. However, most local stores have them very inexpensive and they will last a long time. Got the sun there, but a huge storm brewing right there, and I'm getting out of here because the lightning's striking close.